I'm guessing that we've all done things that we regret bitterly. In the cold light of day, it was sheer madness for me to have said that, for me to have done that. What was I thinking? We would be here all morning if I were to list the things I have done. Actually, we wouldn't, because I would die of shame in front of you, and you would walk out in disgust. I'm very privileged in that I have a steady stream of people to my door, including some of you who have done some very bad things. Why is that a privilege? Because the gospel is for people who have done bad things. In fact, I think I can go far as to say the gospel is only for people who have done bad things. And that means if that's not you, then the gospel is not for you. Exodus chapter 32 is a jaw-droppingly bad chapter in Israel's history, but it is a jaw-droppingly wonderful chapter for people like me who are no better than the people of Israel in 1500 BC. My first heading, jaw-dropping madness. We are at the foot of Mount Sinai. God has rescued his very undeserving people from the brutally evil Pharaoh. He's led them through the Red Sea. He's provided for them. He's protected them. He's led them. They've experienced his very serious holiness at the foot of Mount Sinai. The mountain shook. The boundaries were set. Only Moses could go anywhere near God. Moses has met with God. God has spoken to him, giving him his wonderful laws to protect them and keep them safe. But it seems that Moses was away up the mountain rather longer than they expected, several weeks. Exodus chapter 32, jaw-dropping madness. When the people saw that Moses was so long in coming down the mountain, they gathered around Aaron and said, "Come, make us gods who will go before us. As for this fellow Moses who brought us up out of Egypt, we don't know what has happened to him." Aaron answered them, "Take off the gold earrings that your wives, your sons and your daughters are wearing and bring them to me." So all the people took off their earrings and brought them to Aaron. He took what they handed him and made it into an idol, cast in the shape of a calf, fashioning it with a tool. Then they said, "These are your gods, Israel, who brought you up out of Egypt." When Aaron saw this, he built an altar in front of the calf and announced, "Tomorrow there will be a festival to the Lord." So the next day the people rose early and sacrificed burnt offerings and presented fellowship offerings. And afterwards they sat down to eat and drink and got up to indulge in revelry. What were they thinking? I say to you, give me your jewellery. Give me your earrings, give me your watches, and we'll go down to Birmingham and we'll go to the jewellery quarter and we will get a goldsmith and we will make a model cow. And we'll put it on a table up the front here. And then we'll say that all the good in our lives is as a result of that cow. And what we're going to do is we are going to put our trust absolutely in that model cow to give us what we deeply crave in life: pardon and provision and protection. What were they thinking of? Well, they were thinking like the rest of the world, because that's what you did in the ancient world. You made statues and symbols to represent the gods, and you bowed down to them. You invested in these little gods in the hope that they would meet your deepest desires. Moses, he's been away rather longer than we expected. Is he going to come back? And if he does come back, what's he going to say to us? Is his God going to say things we don't like? Is he going to tell us things we don't want to do? No. What we'll do is we'll do what everyone else does. We'll just make a little model and we'll worship that. And actually this gold calf that we've made, hey look, it lets us do what we want. So we can have lots of food, lots of drink, lots of sex. We can be as happy as pigs in muck. But this is jaw-dropping madness on every level because they weren't pigs. They were human beings made to reflect God's image. They weren't made for muck. They were made for glorious, spotless purity. And a gold ornament that couldn't speak, couldn't guide, couldn't protect. An ornament that had no history, had no personality, had no power. Jaw-dropping madness. And my second point, is God angry? No. He is gloriously angry. And by that I mean we get a glimpse of how glorious he is because he's angry. Verse 7, then the Lord said to Moses, go down because your people whom you brought up out of Egypt have become corrupt. They've been quick to turn away from what I commanded them and have made themselves an idol cast in the shape of a calf. They have bowed down to it and sacrificed to it and have said, these are your gods, Israel, who brought you up out of Egypt. I've seen these people, the Lord said to Moses, and they are a stiff-necked people. Now leave me alone so that my anger may burn against them and that I may destroy them. Then I will make you into a great nation. And Moses, verse 19, when Moses approached the camp and saw the calf and the dancing, his anger burned. And he threw the tablets out of his hands, breaking them to pieces at the foot of the mountain. At the tablets, those are the stone tablets on which the commandments had been written. Moses smashed them. Was this a fit of rage? Was this him throwing the dinner service across the room? No, not at all. Moses was symbolizing the seriousness of what had happened. The covenant. The promise that I will be your God and you will be my people, that agreement was smashed to pieces by the people's actions. To our deep sorrow, we see covenants broken from time to time, don't we? We see it in marriages. To our deep sorrow, we see it destroyed by the actions of the husband or the wife. One day you're at work and a colleague is very distraught. Another day you get a telephone call from a family member and you say, you okay? And then out it comes, my husband has been hitting me. My wife is having an affair. And as you hear those words from your friend, you can feel your anger. Are you right to be angry? You are absolutely right to be angry. Because your friend's husband, your friend's wife has fundamentally broken the covenant between them, perhaps even irreparably. Exodus 32 is actually Genesis 3, isn't it? Genesis 3, do you remember in the Garden of Eden? Back in the Garden of Eden, mankind said, no, we're not going to live under your loving rule. You don't know best, God. You haven't got our best interests at heart. We found something else we want more than you. Genesis 3, it was fruit. Exodus 32, it's a gold ornament. We are breaking the deal, God. We found something more attractive than you to go with. And God's anger? A father who is not angry at his children's misbehaviour is no loving father. A wife who is not angry at her husband's adultery is no loving wife. And a God who is not angry at his people's spiritual adultery is no loving God. Gloriously, God is very, very, very angry indeed, because his people are so precious to him. And so my next heading, God's glory in his mercy. And let me warn you, we're going to look hard here. Verse 25, on first hearing, you're going to think there's no mercy here. But I promise you there is mercy here. Verse 25, Moses saw that the people were running wild and that Aaron had let them get out of control and so become a laughingstock to their enemies. So he stood at the entrance to the camp and said, "Whoever is for the Lord, come to me." And all the Levites rallied to him. Then he said to them, "This is what the Lord, the God of Israel, says. Each man strap a sword to his side, go back and forth through the camp from one end to the other, each killing his brother and friend and neighbour." The Levites did as Moses commanded, and that day about 3,000 of the people died. Where is the mercy in those verses, we ask? Those are brutal verses, not merciful mercies, aren't they? No, let me show you. Firstly, how many people should have died that day? Well, there were approaching 2 million idolatrous Israelites. How many actually died? About 3,000. I got my calculator out. 99.9% of the people did not get what they deserved. Why these 3,000, we don't know, but the other 1,997,000, they received extraordinary mercy that day. So had their sin been magicked away, had it been brushed under the carpet? Verse 30, the next day Moses said to the people, "You have committed a great sin." He's talking to the 1,997,000. "You have committed a great sin, but now I will go up to the Lord, and perhaps I can make atonement for your sin." That word atonement, perhaps, says Moses, I can do whatever it takes to cover over your sin. But next we get to hear, and we'll come on to it in the Bible in a second, next we get to hear about God's book. God, it seems, has a book, and in it are the names of all the people who are his, all the people who have eternal life. Sarah and I have been invited to a wedding this summer. We've said yes. Our names are on the guest list. And when we arrive at the venue, we will not be turned away because our names are on the guest list. To be blotted out of God's guest list, to be blotted out of God's book, to be denied entry into God's eternal kingdom, to face eternity without any light, any goodness, any love, any aspect of God's goodness. Verse 31, so Moses went back to the Lord and said, "Oh, what a great sin these people have committed. They've made themselves gods of gold. But now, please forgive their sin. But if not, then blot me out of the book you have written." Those who do not want God will not get God. Those who reject God in this life will be rejected by him in the next. They will not find their names on his guest list. But Moses says, "Lord, please forgive my fellow Israelites. Please don't blot them out of your book, despite the fact they're the sort of people who will worship anything rather than you. Verse 32, but now please forgive their sin. But if not, if you can't do that, then blot me out of the book that you have written. Do you see what Moses is asking them? He's saying, if it's just impossible for you to forgive them, please let me make atonement for them. Please let my name be blotted out instead of theirs. And what does God say? Well, he effectively says, you're right, Moses, their sin cannot just be forgiven. It can't just be forgiven. Verse 33, the Lord replied to Moses, whoever has sinned against me, I will blot out of my book. Now go, lead the people to the place I spoke of, and my angel will go before you. However, when the time comes for me to punish, I will punish them for their sin. So he's saying to them, off you go to the promised land, but when the time comes for me to punish, I will punish. Where is mercy in that verse? Where is mercy in verse 34? Please would you look at it. Where is mercy in those words? When the time comes for me to punish, I will punish. Where is the mercy in that verse? The mercy in that verse is 1,500 years later. Because 1,500 years later, John records for us, John chapter 2, verse 4, Jesus said, my time has not yet come. John 7:30, his time had not yet come. John 8:20, his time had not yet come. But then on the Sunday before he died, we read Jesus saying, John 12:23, the time has come. And as he washed his disciples' feet on the Thursday before he died, John 13:1, Jesus knew that the time had come. And just prior to his arrest, John 17:1, Jesus looked towards heaven and prayed, Father, the time has come. The time referred to in Exodus 32 had now come for God to rightly punish, but the jaw-dropping shock here is that God took the punishment on himself. He came down to earth, and on a spring afternoon 2,000 years ago, the time finally came for him to take the sin of those 1,997,000 Israelites onto himself, along with the sins of countless other vile offenders like you and me who had put or would put their trust in him. There is mercy in that verse. Jesus was blotted out of the book of life so that his people wouldn't have to be. God's glory in his mercy. And so 3,500 years ago, God's people were able to keep going towards the promised land. And today, those of us who constantly cry to the Lord Jesus for mercy are likewise headed towards the promised land that we call heaven. Jesus had his life blotted out instead of yours being blotted out. And so my last heading, please forgive me, some of you will have spotted that I have stolen this heading. John wrote his gospel, John's gospel, but he also wrote 3 letters, very imaginatively I always think, called 1 John, 2 John, 3 John. And the very last sentence of his first letter is, "Dear children, keep yourself from idols." And isn't that the clear message of Exodus 32 for us? The God of the universe has chosen you by name to be in his book of life. He has rescued you at enormous cost to himself. He guarantees to keep covering your sin. He guarantees to keep covering your moments of jaw-dropping madness. He guarantees to keep providing for you and protecting you. He guarantees to lead you home. And do you know, you will not leave this life a moment too soon, nor will he delay your entry into heaven a moment too long. God is enormously powerful. God is enormously loving. God is enormously everything. And so are you really going to continue to chase the things the rest of the world are chasing? Objects you must have, even though your having them prevents you being generous towards God's kingdom. Experiences you must enjoy, even though they take you away from God spiritually or away from God's people on a Sunday. Admiration and acceptance and status you must have from your family and your friends and your employer, even though it causes you to compromise. I've written down something on the pew sheet. It was written 500 years ago. I think it's quite good. I don't think I would have guessed it was written 500 years ago. Idolatry is having or inventing something in which to put our trust instead of or in addition to the only true God who has revealed himself in his word. It's the in addition to that I don't like. Having or inventing something in which to put our trust instead of or in addition to the only true God. What do I chase? Who do I chase that I believe will give me the deep happiness and fulfillment that I crave? What object, what experience, whose admiration do I crave? But if I get these things at the expense of a relationship with the God who died for me, what person, what family member are you investing in? What course of action, what course of thinking are you investing in the hope that that'll give you your deepest desire? What idol do you need to keep yourself from? Do you need someone to help you work out what your current idol is? What are you going to do? Dear children, keep yourself from idols.